4 October 2376. Transport Alpha 1. Lieutenant Mike Tanaka sat behind the controls of Transport Alpha 1 as it approached planet Regulus Delta 4. He had barely made it through flight school and the physical requirements. The simple truth was that Mike was fat. Joining the global defense fleet had not been his dream, but his family had been poor. So he had left, meaning that they had one less mouth to feed. Every evaluation, every examination, he had barely made it through, but he was still here. To score points with his superiors, he had volunteered for this mission. Half of the galaxy was ruled by the Ayorian Empire. For reasons that didn't matter now, the Ayorian Empire was on the brink of civil war. The empire was made out of 100 fiefdoms. 20 were ruled by the royal family and their allies. 33 were run by a group of politicians called the Northern Shadow Cluster, and the last 47 formed the Southern Shadow Cluster. The royal family was neutral, but the two shadow clusters were on the edge of full-blown war. Royal space was a buffer between the two, but there was a border that was 7 solar system wide. And in those solar systems were people that needed to be evacuated before the war erupted. The problem was the two shadow clusters didn't trust the royal faction as far as they could throw it. So the job of evacuating had fallen to Earth. Which was why 3 transports were on their way to Regulus Delta 4. It was the first planet on their destination list. Each transport was carrying 24 Marines and 1 pilot. Mike was flying Alpha 1, while Finn Drake was behind the controls of Alpha 2 and Elias Ward was steering Alpha 3. Like Mike, they had volunteered, but also like him, they hadn't had much choice. Drake had gambled too much during his last shore leave and needed the hazard pay. Elias Ward had made the mistake of going on a date with Admiral Rodriguez's daughter, so he had needed a way to stay out of the Admiral's reach. Regulus Delta 4 was the most distant planet on the list. They would slowly work their way back towards Earth space. Even under the best conditions, the trip would take weeks, which would hopefully give the Admiral time to cool down. "How long until we touch down, Lieutenant?" a female voice said. 5 minutes, Captain Chen, he answered. Captain Amy Chen was in command of the Marines aboard Alpha 1, while Captain Jake Morrison was in charge of the Marines on Alpha 2, and Captain Lisa Parker ran the show on Alpha 3. Between the 3 of them, they had enough medals to decorate every skyscraper in New York. The sensors indicated that they were entering the atmosphere. Then the ship rattled a bit, before settling as they flew through a green sky. He spotted the capital city of Ramallo. Working the scanners, he found the central plaza. "I've found the landing zone, Captain." "Take us." That was as far as she got before the city's defenses opened fire. It appeared to be a grid of anti-aircraft guns, spitting out bolts of energy. Mike took the transport into the nap of the planet, barely dodging the first salvo of incoming fire. Transport Alpha 2 was not so lucky. It was hit and exploded. More fire passed over Alpha 1, but Mike didn't lose his cool. Then Alpha 3 was destroyed. He cursed under his breath. "This is bad." He reached the edge of the city and climbed just enough to keep from hitting the buildings. The city's defenses kept shooting, making Mike curse more. But he managed to keep Alpha 1 from getting hit, until he ran out of cover. The only way to the central plaza was a wide boulevard. As soon as he reached the passage, they took multiple hits. He kept the transport going until they reached the plaza. Then the engines cut out and the ship crashed. Something hit him in the head and the world went black. Command Center. "Alpha." Commander Jan Waxel cursed into his communications unit as he ordered his people to cease fire. Waxel was an Ayorian. Had he been born in a fantasy role-playing game, he would have been called a Dragonborn. His assignment was Commander-in-Chief of the Planetary Defense Force of Regulus Delta 4. As for his allegiance, he was not a fan of either Shadow Cluster. But he was stuck under the thumb of the Northern Shadow Cluster. and resigning would pass control of this garrison to his second-in-command Ragal Zeros, a man Waxel didn't trust as far as he could throw him. Zeros was a northern hardliner and an utter idiot. As for the current situation, some fool back on the home world had sent the information on the Earth evacuation vessels on the wrong channel. This had resulted in the information arriving after the ships themselves, which was why Lieutenant Reimer, the commander of the capital city's defense grid, had gone with the standard response when they had approached. To shoot first and ask questions, never the guns finally went silent. Then Waxel bolted from the control room he had been in. Maybe, just maybe, he could salvage this whole mess before it escalated the Civil War into something a lot worse. Transport Alpha 1. Mike woke in a world of pain. Alpha 1 was a wreck, and so was he. He had burns, broken bones, and he was pretty sure he was bleeding, but he no idea how, but he was still alive. Then the answer appeared in the form of Corporal Denise Rodriguez. In her 20s, Denise was from Colombia. She was also the niece of Admiral Rodriguez. He had been furious when she had joined the enlisted training program instead of becoming an officer. On the bright side, she was a top-notch medic, thus explaining Mike's continued survival. She was hovering over him, treating him as best as she could. How bad? It's bad, don't talk, save your strength. How many survivors? 4, counting you and me. You're the only officer left. Chen died during the crash. He was about to ask for more information, but then he felt the sharp sting of a needle. His vision blurred and then he passed out, which was he didn't notice when Waxel broke down the transport door. The commander found a craft on fire. He held up his hands, proofing that he was unarmed. Lucky, get William out of here, Rodriguez said. One of the other survivors was Private Samantha Lucky O'Connell. Proving her nickname, she had survived the ordeal without a scratch. William was Private William Henderson, who had a broken arm. Henderson was the unit's explosive expert. Lucky helped Henderson out of the wreck. May we? Waxel asked. Rodriguez nodded. Waxel stood aside and 2 Ayorian medics came inside, carrying a stretcher between them. They gently put Mike on the stretcher and carried him out. Waxel offered Rodriguez a hand. She gave him a look, but took it. He helped her out of the wreck. She had a feeling that she might have left the wreck, but was headed deeper into trouble. Command Center. Alpha. Ambassador Theta Gamma 2 looked like an Ayorian, but was actually a robot. Representing the Dragon Federation, the power that ruled the half of the galaxy that wasn't the Ayorian Empire, his official designation was shortened to Gamma by most people. He was the only dragon in the group of people that needed to be evacuated. Besides him, there were 18 more people that needed to leave this planet before all hell broke loose. There were 3 officials whose job it had been to represent the royal family until the Emperor had ordered them to return to the homeworld. 2 of them were married, and they had 4 children. The last official, Vazardammer, didn't have any children of his own, but he did have a niece. While his brother and his wife were in the middle of a nasty divorce, Lena Dammer had joined her uncle to stay out of the line of fire. This brought the count up to 10. Next on the list were Quora Final and Myra Greenscale. Greenscale was the representative the planet of Regulus Tango 2, which was the nearest inhabited planet to Regulus Delta 4. 24.3 light-years away, the locals had a name that nobody who wasn't one of them could pronounce. Between that and their appearance, everybody simply called them orcs. Final was human and represented a mining company called Jones Interstellar Inc. Jones Interstellar had 2 automated mines in the asteroid belt. She kept an eye on the equipment and dealt with any technical issues that came up. She had a 3-person team to help her with any problems. 2 Lycans and 1 Saren. Lena Dammer also helped her out. Finally, there was Dr. Ezer and his 2 lab assistants. Ezer was an orc immunologist researching Ayorian diseases, making sure they weren't mutating into something that could affect his species. The 19 of them were in a bunker underneath an apartment building called Command Center Alpha. It had 5 floors. The evacuees were on the top floor. Below that was Commander Waxel's command complex. Gamma was in his bedroom, recharging his power cell, when there was a knock at the door. "Enter," he said as he opened his eyes. The door opened, and one of the guards entered. He informed Gamma that he was needed in the common room. Gamma nodded, disconnected from the power grid, and made his way to the common room. It was basically a big living room with a kitchenette. The rest of the evacuees were already there. Gamma listened as Commander Waxel explained that their transports had been destroyed. When he told them what had gone wrong with the transmission, Gamma frowned. "Transmitted on the wrong channel," he began. "That's suspicious." "I agree," the commander said. "Which is why we send a message on the highest priority channel straight to the Emperor." Gamma made a face. Suddenly, he was very glad not to be assigned to Ioria Prime, or even on the planet. Emperor Ayas didn't suffer fools, and his fury towards traitors was probably even worse. Ioria Prime. Royal. Palace. Emperor Ayas had read the message from Regulus Delta 4. It had taken him less than 5 minutes to figure out who the culprit was. A junior communications officer called Varash. So now he was making his way through the palace towards the main communications hub. He entered the room, a small room crammed full of equipment and chairs, and found Varash asleep at his post. The young man was snoring loudly while talking to somebody in his sleep. "Yes, more peanut butter," Varash muttered, while drooling into his uniform. Ayas frowned. Then he noticed the mug. It was empty, but when he picked it up and sniffed it, there was the distinct aroma of earth chocolate, which explained a thing or two. Due to their different genetics and digestive system, chocolate affected Iorians differently. Chocolate did to Iorians what alcohol did to humans. He wondered why Varash's superiors hadn't come down on him for being drunk on the job. It was then that he realized that Varash was the only person here. A hunch formed in the back of his head. He gently woke Varash. The man's eyes made it clear that he hadn't slept in ages. But when he recognized the Emperor, he snapped to attention. "Sire, Your Highness." He stood up so fast that his chair toppled over. "I'm sorry, I didn't meant to." "At ease, officer." Ayas gave him a reassuring smile. "Where is the rest of the staff, and when is the last time you slept?" "Everybody else has been reassigned, sire. The Royal Border Regiments need everybody they can get, Your Highness. And I have no idea, sire. The days have been blurring together since everybody else left." Ayas nodded. The Royal Border Regiments were the forces that guarded the borders between royal space and the rest of the Ayorian Empire. They had been preparing for the civil war for weeks. Not because they would be fighting in it, but because they were expecting a flood of refugees from the rest of the empire. Ayas calmly explained what had happened at Regulus Delta 4, making Varash go pale. "I sent the message on the wrong channel and people died," he said, before running to a small bathroom next to the hub and losing his last meal in the toilet. "It's not your fault, officer," Ayas said, helping the man towards a chair. "You're trying to do the work of 14 people. There were supposed to be 3 shifts of 4 officers each and 2 supervisors. We never should have left you in this situation." "That doesn't help the dead, sire." Varash burst into tears. Ayas grabbed one of the other chairs and sat down next to the man. He put his arms around the man and let him cry. "Command Center. Alpha." This time, Mike was pretty sure he was dead. There was no way he could have survived his injuries, even with Corporal Rodriguez's excellent care. So when he opened his eyes again, he was extremely sure he was either in heaven or hell. The fact that the first thing he saw was an Ayorian in a lab coat made it pretty clear that he had been sent into eternal damnation. This was backed up by the pain that was everywhere in his body. "Oh no, they send me downstairs," he muttered as he closed his eyes again. Not yet, Rodriguez said. You're still in the land of the living. He opened his eyes again and looked around. He was in a high-tech medical bay, which was clearly Ayorian. Next to him, an Ayorian doctor was using some advanced device to fix Henderson's broken arm. Rodriguez was sitting on a stool between the two beds, making notes on a paper notepad with a pencil. Using the opportunity to learn about Ayorian medicine, Corporal. Yes, sir. Good, he smiled, despite the seriousness of the situation. So, how bad are things? The bleeding has stopped and your bones have been mended, sir. But the burns, she sighed. Ayorian skin is reptilian. Their grafts won't take, Lieutenant. They've bandaged them and put you on pain medications. How bad does it feel? 7 out of 10. Without the drugs, it would probably be 9.5 out of 10, sir. I'll have them increase the dose. She gestured to a nearby Ayorian nurse, who came over so that they could whisper something. The nurse nodded and got to work. The good news is that you should be in good enough shape to move in 3 days. The bad news is that the northern and southern fleets will be here in 3.5. There's not much of a margin, sir. What are the chances of salvaging Alpha 1? Mike asked as the extra drugs took effect and his pain faded to a 5. None, she's totally wrecked. We need a new. Commander Waxel entered the medical bay at that moment. Commander Waxel. We're working on a new plan to get you out of here. It would help if one of you was in the meeting, Waxel said. Go, Mike said. That's an order, Corporal. Rodriguez followed Waxel out of the medical bay, leaving Mike to sink back into unconsciousness. In the corridor, Denise was running through ideas in her head, but so far they all sucked. She followed Waxel into a meeting room where Myra Greenscale, Ambassador Theta Gamma 2, and several others were arguing about their options. She noticed Lena Dammer sitting in a corner, drawing something. Denise winked at her, getting a smile from the 8-year-old. We need to get off this planet. Regover Rimac, one of the royal officials, yelled. There are no ships here, Greenscale said. We're not going anywhere. What about the robot ships that take the ore from the mining stations to the refinery? Gamma asked. Those are fully automated, Final said. Even if their cargo bays were empty, there would be no way to fly them, because there are no controls. Only on the... Lena Dammer began, before the fact that everybody was looking at her made her swallow the rest of the sentence. Why are we listening to a child? Rimac snarled. What does she... Shut up, Rimac, Rodriguez said. Now, what were you saying, Lena? Well, we learned in history class that Jones Interstellar started with normal freighters with full crews. They later figured out how to automate them. So, the only NEW ones don't have any controls. But if we could find a first-generation ship, it would have everything needed for a crew. Final began. It's just all turned off, but with the emergency codes, we could turn everything it all back on and switch to manual operation. She picked an electronic pad and searched the local files. Got it. SS Valkyrie. She's in storage at Station 1, designed for a crew of 30 and should have enough hyperdrive fuel for a 25 light-year trip. There should also be emergency supplies at both stations, each holding enough to convert one of the cargo bays into an emergency shelter. And between the 2 stations, we should have everything needed to restock the Valkyrie's medical bay. 25 light-years is enough to get to my homeworld, Greenscale said. How many cargo bays are there? 5. Why? If we can load the other 3 cargo bays with the right ores, you should be able to trade for fuel, parts, and supplies once we get there. You could use the Valkyrie to salvage the mission and visit the other 6 solar systems on the list. The only problems are getting to Station 1 and getting the ship going before the fleets get here. We have shuttles. They all looked at Waxel. They don't have FTL drives, so they were useless for your previous problem, but they'll get you to Station 1 in 2 hours. So then it would be an old-fashioned space race, Rodriguez said. Fortunately, us humans are good at those. That's how you got to your moon, right? Lena asked. Yes, it is, she smiled at Lena. You keep paying attention in history class, Lena. It'll safe your scales more than once. Lena nodded. Then Rodriguez turned her attention back to the group. They got to work on planning how to get the Valkyrie back into space. SS Valkyrie. Bridge. Mike walked onto the bridge of the Valkyrie and looked around. His body was fully functional again. Well, except for the burns. But those were hidden under fresh bandages. He would have to deal with those for the rest of his life. But he had been weaned off the pain medication. As for the Valkyrie, she was dusty and outdated. But like Mike, it was fully functional. The bridge was a square room with a captain's chair and 4 consoles. One was the helm, 2 were engineering, and the last one was science. So you want the Kirk chair or the helm? Rodriguez said as she entered. I'm still a pilot, so I'm going for the helm, Mike said. Where is everybody else? Most of them are in their cabins. Except Final and her team, they were going stir-crazy, so they are in the engine room to keep things running there. Lucky and Henderson are making sure that everybody is ready for the jolt of launch. They'll be here soon. Good. He sat down behind the helm and began the pre-flight checklist. I need you at science. Lucky and Henderson will deal with engineering consoles. Yes, sir. Rodriguez sat at the science console. Lucky and Henderson arrived just as they finished the pre-flight checklist. They took their seats at the engineering stations just before Mike fired up the thrusters. The ship hovered just about the floor as Mike retracted the ship's landing gear. He pressed a button to transmit a signal. Valkyrie was parked in a hangar bay deep inside Station 1. The signal opened the door, revealing a shaft that framed a slice of space. Here we go. He fired up the sublight engines and gently took the ship out of Station 1. Station 1 was an asteroid honeycombed with passages and modules attached to the surface. They pulled away from it quickly. Mike plotted the course for Regulus Tango 2. But they had to wait until they were in clear space before he engaged the hyperdrive. That was when the science console beeped. We have incoming, Rodriguez said. 8 northern warships and 12 southern warships. They're ahead of schedule, Henderson said. How long until they start shooting? Mike asked. 6 minutes, give or take. Time to go, Mike said, before slamming a big, red button and the hyperdrive began cycling up for the jump. 1 minute later, Valkyrie jumped into hyperspace and bolted from the Regulus Delta system. 5 minutes and 11 seconds later, the 2 fleets started shooting at one another. The Ayorian Empire civil war had begun. To be continued.